Hello and welcome to my podcast, Used to Be's Do Count, with me, Dean James. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 7, I Used to Be a Woman. In this episode, I speak with Kane Howard about his transition from female to male.
I think one of the earliest memories that I can dissect is like being taught like the differences between like, hey, this is what happens to boys, this is what happens to girls, like in puberty and such stuff like that. And I innately thought that the boy puberty was going to happen to me. I had never told my father that I was trans or that I had started taking testosterone.
Again, tough, like it needs patience, it needs courage, it needs support again.
A lot of people were very nice, and then one person, we were having a conversation and it actually kind of came up, and like I told him that I was trans, like he reacted with total disgust.
Kane proudly and confidently tells me the ups and downs of being a trans man. So without further ado, let's dive in and hear his story. Okay, welcome, Kane Howard. Thank you so much for joining Used to Be's Do Count. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's very humid out in Pennsylvania.
Is it humid? Oh, I hate humidity. You said in Pennsylvania. So for those of you who don't know you, Kane, tell everybody who you are, where are you in the world, and what are you up to right now?
Yeah, so my name is Kane Howard, as we already just went over. I live in Pennsylvania, and that's, it's pretty much just the state below New York over on the East Coast of the United States. Right now, I'm still like a student in college. I'm also working a communications fellowship over the summer, and I have a student job as a content writer and newsletter editor. So that's pretty much what I have going on right now. I'm also an author and a writer.
Yeah, and you're an author and a writer as well, creator and writer as well. So that's keeping you very busy. Plus you're studying. Plus you've got this fellowship going on. So lots of really good stuff that's varied, I guess, and keeping you busy. I want to talk about all of it, but as you know, of course, this is Used to Be's Do Count. So we are going to focus a lot of the conversation stay on your used to be. So tell everyone what your used to be was.
So I used to be a woman, basically. I've transitioned. I do kind of like on the cusp consider myself a little non-binary, but pretty much transitioned from like female to male. I've done male on all of my documents and everything. So
Great. So you've transitioned from female to male. It's important actually to know this because you have transitioned from female to male. So your documents would say male, but your pronouns would be they, them, or rather than he, what would you say at the moment?
he or they, pretty much I felt like just under like the transgender umbrella. I just mentioned like the non-binary part because it's like, oh, there's some feminine aspects of myself that I still like. And also like as we're doing today, reconnecting with my younger self, like reconnecting with certain parts of that are still important to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I want to hear about that and talk about that actually as well, because it's not you have left part of yourself behind, but also I want to talk about how you see yourself and whether you've brought any of those parts with you. And it sounds like you have, which I love because we're human and we're complex. And yeah, let's go back, Kane, to when you were living as a woman, a female.
Mhm.
And just before you started your transition. So tell me what it was like growing up. Were you a young female teenager in school, going through college?
So I've taken like a little bit of a non-traditional path for almost everything in my life. I was homeschooled when I was younger, so I was a little bit isolated. Pretty much I tell people that the internet raised me. Um,
Which is exciting and dangerous in equal measures.
Exciting and dangerous, absolutely, especially being a millennial on the internet at the time we grew up. Um, Not as many people looking out for us, but I'm also glad that things didn't go super viral like they do nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't have as much like daily peer-to-peer interaction. Um, I discovered when I was very young that I liked women, so I identified as a lesbian for a lot of years. And again, I was extremely young when I realized that. So, still within the queer community, and a lot of things felt off when I was growing up that I didn't quite realize until I was looking back. Because back then, I was already like 14 years old before I knew that the concept of like transitioning and transgender actually existed. Um, I think one of the earliest memories that I can dissect is like being taught like the differences between like, hey, this is what happens to boys, this is what happens to girls, like in puberty and such stuff like that. And I innately thought that the boy puberty was going to happen to me.
Oh, did you really? Wow.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like, oh, you don't know that. Like it was just like, oh, childhood confusion.
It just felt like that, right? You didn't sort of, you weren't able to sort of correlate that thought as such, but you just felt like, oh, when I go through puberty, this is going to happen from the boy's perspective.
Yeah. Um, and because we talk about gender dysphoria and transgender identities and transitioning a lot more these days. Like it was, I mean, I was born in the early 90s. Like we barely talked about it at all.
Absolutely, yeah. There's just a lack of representation and information out there, really. And also, you were at home, like you said yourself, a little bit isolated, and so I think that probably didn't help with maybe some confusing thoughts because you didn't necessarily have a lot of peer groups to sort of bounce off or even compare yourself to and understand, okay, do I fit in there? Do I fit in there? Do I see myself as this person? We all sort of do that naturally, I guess, in schools because we're surrounded by, you know, um, yeah, our age group, but you didn't have that. So you had to find that somehow yourself in a different way.
Yeah, and it's just like I usually connect with things on the internet, which was how like, identifying as being part of the lesbian community. I was all into that with like my peers online, but my peers could be like anywhere in the world, not just anywhere close to me that I could hang out with them. When I did do like some things, like I went to Girl Scouts regularly, I didn't really feel like I was a part of the group at all. It's just kind of like looking back, especially through my teenage years, I kind of feel like I was devoid of a personality in a way.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I wasn't everything that I could be as a person. Um, Also, attitudes with teenagers and any part of the LGBTQ were not great back then. Um, so even though there was a bunch of girls that identified as bi, like they were somehow not okay with someone who identified as lesbian, which was odd.
Crazy.
Um,
It was a different time for
yeah,
sure, and I grew up in a very similar time as well, and it was just very different. There were definitely a lot more negative views on anything that was gay, and gay was definitely othered. It still is
mhm.
now, to an extent, but obviously it's a lot better now. So growing up, you said that you did identify as a lesbian woman. That was a struggle, and that would be a struggle, I think, for anyone who is gay or lesbian growing up to sort of, again, reconcile those feelings and feel proud and not feel different or ashamed in a world that doesn't necessarily accept you. But you also mentioned that you didn't necessarily feel that you had much of a personality as such. Um, Tell me
Yeah.
about that. What things looking back did you like? Did you dislike? Were you into, music, art, sports, anything like that? Was there anything that you were into?
So to answer like the totality of the personality question, that'll be like when we move closer to like the transitioning part. That was definitely like looking back, but also like very in the moment, feeling very bland, even though I had a lot of interests. I was obsessed with playing and writing music for a long time. I wrote a lot of songs, throughout my teen years. I think I was at a point where I was writing like songs every single week. And then I was writing a lot of stories, even if they were just things that only I was ever going to read or friends were ever going to read. And I was always exploring, like, queer identities with the things I was writing. I would not like to go back and read any of them right now.
But the process of was very important.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful to me, but they were very like Tumblr-esque, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I like channeled a lot of creative energy into like those types of expressions. Um, and I was gonna say like being online a lot, uh, being a part of like different forums for games and stuff that I was playing. There was one person who continuously, how you're on online communities, like you have people who start drama, cause drama.
Yeah, the keyboard warriors. Yeah.
Um, well, not that type of drama necessarily, just like all around drama.
Hmm.
And like they post every day in the community as well, who everybody assumed was someone who was male. And this person would also post like, "Hey, I'm experimenting with feminine things," like blah blah blah, for like a year, maybe a year and a half that I've been on that forum. Then all of a sudden, they came out and said, "Hey, I uh, am actually like assigned female at birth." I don't remember the wording. This was like in the early 2000s. Um, I was actually assigned female at birth, and now I'm going to be going on testosterone, and I'm going to be documenting some of the changes here. And, at first people were freaking out. They were like, "Oh, well, you lied to us about being a guy." And another, like, very large portion of people were very interested in, like, the changes. And I was like, hold the phone. Why does this resonate with me? And I couldn't get it out of my mind. Um, I'd never known that that was an option.
Right.
But I mentioned it because I was like 14 at the time. I mentioned it to an adult friend who said, "Oh no, you would have known that like explicitly about yourself from the time you were extremely young. You would have been like saying, 'Oh, I'm a boy,' like verbally."
Who
And
said that? Your
so
friend?
I just, huh?
Who said that? Your friend?
Oh yeah, an adult friend that I had.
Wow,
He was like a family friend.
that's unfortunate. Again, miseducation and a lack of knowledge, really. But yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay.
And it was like because a lot of people who transition, a lot of people have gender dysphoria. The number one experience you'll see if you're going to like any of these forums, subreddits, groups, whatever nowadays, is people who very obviously have a lot of gender dysphoria are like, "Oh, I don't think I'm really trans. Can I really be trans? Maybe I'm not."
Can
So
you,
it
for
was
anyone
very
out there,
easy, like,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but for anyone out there who doesn't really understand what gender dysphoria is, could you try to sort of summarize that in a nutshell kind of thing, just to understand what that is and what that means for people?
yeah. Um, Generally like any disconnect between your assigned gender at birth and what you feel, is your authentic self. And like that can be different for different people. Like for some people, it can be different things with their bodies. For other people, maybe our voice or being called by their birth name or like being assumed of being like the gender they were assigned at birth. Um,
Sure.
and then a lot of people do say that like they don't feel dysphoria. Um, that's a big like discourse within the community. I think that what they've said is they don't feel dysphoria prior to transitioning. They felt gender euphoria afterwards, like a lot of joy
Mm.
and like being their authentic selves. And that's everybody's like own individual journey. So it's definitely not up to me to like,
No, thank you for summarizing it, but it's really important to understand what that is, but also that it is really unique for everybody. The feelings, when they happen, how they happen, is everyone's personal journey. And for you, you started to feel those things quite strongly and then start to realize at 14, oh, there was an option here that you had to transition. You got an education there. And so I guess those thoughts started becoming more prominent that you could transition. Did you start to explore how you would do that at that point?
So that's what I was saying a little bit about, like, we always have our doubts about ourselves, and like that's very common. Um, so being given like a valid reason for those doubts by that adult friend, I tried to just shove that down in. I was like, okay, then this is not a real thing for me. Like this is never something I have to worry about. So I went through a lot more years of my life. I tried to do a little bit of college online, and it didn't quite work out for me because I also have really bad ADHD. Um, so I stopped doing that. And I think it was about 20, going on 21, when I realized, wait, am I only living my life as a woman because that's what's expected of me? Do I really feel like that? Um, and I was also like very extremely hyper feminine as well. So I think a lot of people's impression is like, oh, if you're like a butch lesbian, then you're closer to like a trans identity, which is not necessarily true at all.
No, yeah, yeah, absolutely. How you represented as a female really had nothing to do with the way that you felt inside. And like you said already, that you are even the femininity you like in yourself, and you've brought that forward in your new identity now. So yeah, that's interesting. And just you did say the age, but I missed it. I'm sorry. How old were you at that point?
When I started to realize that, probably like about 20 going on 21.
Okay, okay. So yeah, this is sort of young adulthood, and there is obviously before that all of the puberty, like you said, going through adolescence, which can be difficult, I guess, for having those feelings and having those confusions. But you did go through all of that, and it wasn't until around 2021 that you started to really strongly, I guess, more acknowledge those feelings a little bit stronger. Did you feel more confident in acknowledging those feelings and thoughts?
Well, to answer that, I was just gonna back up slightly, like, and when I did go through puberty,
Yeah.
um, because everybody's bodies are different. My body said, yeah, estrogen. And so, um, I was always like a little bit distressed with like particular aspects of my body. It had just gotten to be that like I kind of subconsciously trained my brain like to not really look in the mirror. Like when I was maybe like coming out of a shower or undressing or something, or to always like hide myself as much as I could in my choice of clothing, um, or get really distressed by certain things. Even pretty young, I decided like, oh, maybe like I want to go and get like a breast reduction someday. Um, so when I started really thinking those thoughts when I was like 20 going on 21, even though I was extremely uncomfortable with how I was perceived, like didn't like my body, didn't like my face, didn't like a lot of stuff about myself, it still felt too big to handle.
I mean, it's a huge thing to handle. I think any trans man out there listening would absolutely relate to what you said just then about the way that the distress that you felt when your body was changing, based on the fact that your body was doing these natural changes, but you felt very differently. Were you talk? Was there anybody in your life that you could talk to about that? Were you expressing that outwardly, or were you just kind of carrying that yourself?
So I carried that for a while, and I kept trying to push it away, but then it became really apparent it wasn't going to go away. So I was expressing that to like friends who I had that were already in the LGBTQ community. I had one friend who started to transition, and depending on like the person that I would go to, what they would say may or may not be helpful. Because the friend who I mentioned who was trans was just like, yeah, go for it. And I was like, I have all these doubts and I don't think this is me. And they were like, oh, whatever, just go for it. And then like friends who were like closer to like the lesbian end of the continuum were just like, oh, well, you would still be attractive, as a guy, I believe. Which is also not very helpful because what they're doing is they're still picturing me as completely and totally female.
Yeah, yeah. They didn't really know, I guess, how to support you in the correct way. And even saying something like, yeah, go for it is for them probably being supportive, but go for it is such a huge thing. It's like, how do I do that? It's how do I even start to explore the avenues to get there? And that is a huge mountain to climb and takes a lot of bravery and education and support, I would say. So when did that transition actually start happening then? When did you actually start exploring those avenues?
So all of this was happening like around the time that I think it was Laverne Cox like was on the cover of, was it Time magazine?
Oh,
And like the
love her.
public conversations around transitioning and trans identities really started happening. So I absolutely couldn't escape it. Um, I was about 22 or 22 going on 23 when I had dated a trans woman for a very short period of time. It's like ended up spilling my guts about that a lot, learning that there was a whole different like spectrum of gender identity. My idea was gonna be like, okay, like I'm just gonna like cut my hair and, sometimes dress in drag and get a binder. And just like always holding myself back a step. And because there was so much anxiety. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
at least starting to explore a different way to represent yourself in the world. Did that feel empowering? Did that feel validating?
It did, but I was always holding myself back a step because I was always online and always like in the communities watching people on their journeys on testosterone and with surgeries, changing their names. And there was always just like feeling like that was something I needed, but having too much anxiety to pursue it. Finally, when I was about 23, um, I got on testosterone. It was not easy though.
Okay, tell
Um,
me about that.
it, it was a little bit if it was just a few years before like informed consent became more readily available where I lived, um, I had to like basically go to a therapist. And like, we were talking about that for probably close to a year. And I also mentioned to a psychiatrist that I had had because I was pursuing treatment for my ADHD. Multiple times, the psychiatrist saw me come into the office like with my head shaved down and like starting to socially transition, meaning, asking to be called by a different name, dressing differently, appearing differently. Um, that psychiatrist was already very familiar with my identity. I asked the therapist for a letter, but she left too soon because she was an intern. She was finishing her internship. I was able to get a letter from the psychiatrist, all these like difficult steps along the way. Um, and well, initially I was going to go to an informed consent clinic that was like in Philadelphia. That's like about a 2 hour drive through a bunch of city traffic. Um, and they had two different buildings in the city of Philly at the time. I'm not very familiar with Philadelphia. I went to the wrong building and I showed up before my appointment, but I didn't know that you had to show up like a certain amount of time early. I can't remember whether it was like a whole half hour or whatnot. And so they turned me away. Um, so I had to go through these steps slightly closer to home and like go to a full-blown endocrinologist. And I had to get the letter from my psychiatrist to start testosterone and everything. Um, just 3 or 4 years later, when I changed primary care doctors to one in my area who sees trans patients, it was informed consent. So all I had to do was like read off a list of like what could happen, sign off, and then I was able to like, have my testosterone. It helps that I'd already been on it.
You were already on it before anyway, but it just got easier that 3 or 4 years later. There were a lot of hoops to jump through, if you like, and a lot of barriers that you found. So you just really needed a lot of patience, dedication, again, bravery, and courage to continue to do that. Just to understand though, in the states where you are, I think it's different in different states. I mean, there are similarities for sure, but in the states that you're in, the law was at that time that you had to see a therapist for at least a year in order for them to make a decision. Is that right?
Well, no, that was just for some of the specific doctors.
The specific doctors were requiring that. It's not necessarily law.
No, and because like there was another informed consent clinic that I could have gone to, but they were scheduling like so many months out that I'm not sure that they were taking new patients at the time. So like these places were absolutely like the informed consent places were absolutely filled with patients and people trying to get in.
Wow. Yeah. And when you were going through all of that, Kane, were you again talking to people? Did you have support? Were you airing your frustrations? I'm sure you were frustrated at times.
Yeah, I had a lot of people online who I was connecting with still, who I could like air my frustrations to and talk about this stuff with.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. And so you were on testosterone. You did start on testosterone at that time. And how quickly did you start to see the effects of that? And how did that feel?
So I was almost always on a low dose. For a while, like a few years later, I went up to a higher dose, but I didn't really like how that felt. Like, I think honestly that it really raised my blood pressure a lot. And it doesn't do that to everyone. Everybody feels differently. But for me, yeah, it was very uncomfortable, at that higher dose.
Yeah, you actually started to feel some negative side effects to that then, and you stayed on a lower dose. Okay. And so the testosterone was the starting point and a continuation of your transition. Before that, you did start to socially transition, but now did you start to feel it was actually happening? Did you start to feel a bit more positive and optimistic about the future, your future self, or how were you feeling at the time? How were you sort of like, you know, understanding what you were going through?
So, I mean, I started to see changes earlier on. Um, a little bit less with facial hair. I didn't get more facial hair till like past year 5, and I've actually heard that that's more common than people think. Um, so like my singing voice and my voice started to deepen a little bit earlier on. Started to get body hair and all of that. But for me, being on testosterone, it was also a little bit of a minefield at that time because I was like over the age of 23, but I was still living with my parents. And like, I had never told my father that I was trans or that I had started taking testosterone. So a lot of people like outside of my family are like, "Are you crazy?" Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's visible changes, but you didn't actually voice it to your parents.
mhm. And like when I would see friends who I hadn't seen for months and months or over a year, they would be like, "Oh my God, your voice is different." And I was like, "I didn't realize that. I live with my voice every day."
Yeah. So how was that then, living at home, going through that, and at some point, I guess you had to have that conversation. So how did that go?
Um, well, first of all, like I'm not quite sure like how he didn't realize that I was on it. We've never had that conversation. I don't think we ever will, particularly. Um, Sometimes it's not as helpful to like go back to like the past on some things. Um,
Yeah, and I think when we're talking to our parents about certain things, sometimes it's best to just leave things where they are and move on and start from where you are now rather than dig up a lot of trauma from the past. So I totally
mhm.
understand that. Yeah.
And like unfortunately it was difficult when I first told my father it didn't go quite well. It led to a situation where we didn't speak for 7 years. Um, after Around after the time I graduated from community college, um, he came back into my life. So,
That's great. I mean, it's not great, obviously, not speaking to your father for 7 years, and I'm sure the the disconnect of the relationship definitely would have taken its toll on you and him probably, but on you emotionally as you were transitioning. So I'm sorry to hear that. I'm really happy to hear though that he is back in your life. And sometimes people need their own time. I don't know the ins and outs of what happened, but how are you coping with the fact that he didn't react very well to the fact that you were trans and that he ceased communication? How were you feeling at that time?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of outside support because I'm pretty sure, like, part of, any type of queer experience, uh, it's more likely to have a period of time where you don't talk to your father
Oh,
than not.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, myself included. Yeah, I mean, it's just so common. Uh, Hopefully getting less common because again, as the generations change and we start to understand a lot more, and there is more representation and there is more acceptance in the world, which there needs to be more of, but we are getting there. But again, this was a certain time in the scheme of things, and your father is of a certain generation, and so we all share, I think, a commonality where we struggle as LGBTQ plus people to come out to our family, and our family fully accept us without shame, or without putting their shame on us, or without society putting our shame on us. So did you come out, I wanted to ask, did you come out to your family that you were a lesbian when you were a woman?
Um, Not necessarily, but like the sign, not like my family as a whole, but the signs were there. Like, um, a lot of well-meaning parents, where, I said I was in Girl Scouts before, a lot of well-meaning parents would often call up and be like having conversations with my mom or my dad in which they were like, "Oh, your kid is just a wonderful kid who just happens to be gay." Um,
Oh, you were outed by
so
other parents who actually loved you. Like, she's great.
continuously, though, continuously throughout years and years, and each time I was able to be like, "Oh no, that was just a phase." Um, but then looking back, I really laugh at that because I'm like, everybody wanted to be in their denial a little bit. Um, I'm pretty sure that like my dad knew or could tell that I liked women. I was not hiding it very well. I thought I was. Um, and personally, I feel like he was at the point where he was or could have been accepting of that. Maybe that's just me being hopeful, but I feel like that. And my mom knew, of course, because like we were always a lot closer.
Okay, that's great. I know you're still very close to your mum now as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. The testosterone is one part of the transition. Were there other parts of the transition here that we need to understand? I know that for different people, there's different things, but there is operations and there are other factors. For you,
Hmm.
what other factors were in play for your transition?
Yeah, so I changed my legal name very early on. Um, it
Was that easy? Was that difficult?
it was difficult because in Pennsylvania, even though you could get your name changed, obviously, um, they didn't, and this was like in 2016, 2017, they didn't make like all the forms or like the process readily available to know what you were supposed to do. So basically, and I just went to the courthouse, like in the county where I was born, spent the whole day going around and asking people questions. I had to go from one office to the next. Finally found everything and I was able to file for it. I had to pay to have abstracting done on me, which is where they look into your background. They make sure you're not trying to escape any like monetary liens or like running from criminal activity or like trying to scam anyone. I had to pay to put notices in two different newspapers that I was changing my name.
Really?
Um,
Forced you to put it in
just
newspapers?
just in case, like, maybe I was trying to evade something or stiff someone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, they do need to do that to protect people because people will probably change their names for all sorts of reasons. So I do get that. But so putting it in the paper just ensured that it would be there in black and white in history forevermore. And they could look back at those records and say, Kane publicly changed their name at this point and it was made public.
and also, like, I know that you can file to kind of have that so that you don't have to do that to like protect yourself. Especially if you're trans. And I fully concede that I got into the process and I didn't feel like I could push anymore. I was just a little exhausted with it and trying to figure out how to do it in the first place. Um, I also, and changing your name, by the way, is not just, I mean, I had to go to court and appear like in the courthouse. And, it's not just done when they grant you your legal name change. You have to go to almost every company that you've ever been affiliated with or had something signed up with in your name for the rest of forever. Had to send notices to creditors. Had to go get a new social security card. Um, I'm still
Passport?
occasionally getting. I didn't have a passport yet at that time, so when I got that, I just was able to use my name. Um, I'm still get spam mail trickling in with my birth name on it.
Yeah, it's going to happen, isn't it? And it's almost like you change your name, which is a huge um milestone, I guess. But then you're continuously, it's almost like I always say I'm continuously coming out, like even now as an adult. You come out when you're younger and you come out and everyone's got their coming out story as like LGBTQ people. But then every new person that you meet, you're always coming out. And that just reminded me of that because you were saying like, you changed your name, but you had to jump through all of these hoops again. And then you had to continue to change your names at all of these companies. So, and then you had to do it publicly. It was like constant, um, again, tough. Like it needs patience, it needs courage, it needs support again. I guess going back to those people that you were talking to online, were they continuing to support this process as well? Did you have that outlet? Did you feel, supported?
I did feel fairly supported. And pretty early on in my transition, I started to date the woman who would go on to be my wife and be my long-term partner. We're still together. So she was very supportive. She always has been.
Incredible. That's lovely to hear. Can I just ask about your birth name? I know that different people call it different things.
Mhm.
Some people call it a dead name. I think we spoke before. You call it a birth name. What was your birth name?
So my birth name was actually Kate. I just changed one letter. And I know I had the ability to like change it to anything I wanted to, but I really liked Kane. Like I felt like I resonated more with that. Like as I was also coming into my name and like my identity, I started to feel more like a person. I started to feel like I had more of a personality.
I was going to ask, so when you really saw in black and white Kate turn to Kane, that is a visible thing that's there for you to see. Did that start to feel different then? Did you start to feel differently in yourself at that point?
I did. And I did want to like mention that I know why a lot of people call it dead name, and I'm like not necessarily against that. It's just for me personally, for myself, I do say birth name. Um, and but yeah, I really, especially in my social interactions with people, because like I started to work in a new line of work at the time. I was working in human services, so basically at group homes for people who needed help with their day-to-day care. Um, and like I told them I was changing my name, and like one of the coworkers heard that, and because they had had like a trans masculine staff member like the year prior, she went around and was like, "Hey, we're calling this person Kane now, and like use the right pronouns and everything else." Which I mean, kind of did out me a little bit there, but it was also helpful. Um, I hadn't it was still like around like 2016, 2017. So there was still a lot of conversations that needed to be had with people for understanding of things at the time. I was also at the place where I was very visibly transitioning. So I was changing my name. Um, I came in to the company saying like, hey, blah, blah, this and that about myself. And then all of a sudden, like I'm growing facial hair and dressing differently. So it wasn't like that was something I was trying very hard to hide.
How was your going into a workplace and transitioning in a workplace when they know you as one person and you're transitioning? How did that feel? Did you feel, were you confident? Were you self-assured? Were you a little bit skeptical about how people would take it?
I had like different experiences with different people. So like a lot of people were very nice. And then um one person we were having a conversation and it actually kind of came up and like I told him that I was trans, like he reacted with total disgust. And I've also had people ask really probing questions at work. So like in future workplace settings when I did different jobs then, I would usually just go in and never talk about my gender because I was passing then at that point. So there was no reason to bring it up.
Exactly. It's always good going into a new environment when you're already, you've already transitioned. It's just that environment where people knew you as one person and saw the transition, I guess. It's also really telling, and I think this is just absolutely in the world, is that the majority of people are good people, and we have a majority of humans who are kind and generous and accepting, and then a small percentage of people who kind of ruin it for us because they're not so accepting and they've got all of these like views. But I do think the majority of people, and you said it there, like the majority of people were nice and kind and fine. It's just always a handful of people to give you that bad experience and to make you, I guess, question humanity sometimes. um,
And also, I had to take off of work at that particular job for like 6 weeks because I know that earlier in the conversation we were talking about medical transition. I had top surgery, which was basically just like bilateral mastectomy. That was the only surgery that I've had.
okay, so
Um,
you had top surgery, and what age were you when you had that?
what age was I was 25.
25. So you really started to
Mhm.
transition and take testosterone around 2021, and then 25 you
Uh,
had, sorry.
23, I started
Oh,
taking testosterone.
23.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been taking testosterone for a couple of years, visibly transitioning, changed your name, which was a huge ordeal, it sounds like, but you got there in the end. And then you had top surgery at 25. Tell me about that. Was that easy, difficult, expensive? How was that having the top surgery?
Extremely expensive. Um, I thought it was going to be covered under insurance and I was not able to get it covered. Um, I had to put it on like a care credit account. I don't know. Do they have care credit there?
But it's kind of different here. Yeah, it is. It does exist for things like that you can credit in all aspects. Absolutely exist. But I think because we have a national health service, people can get surgery on the national health service. But there are lots of hoops to jump through in the UK as well. Lots of people to speak to for a very long time before that happens. But it can be covered by the NHS, by the National Health Service. Obviously, the States is very different. You don't have a national health service as such. It's all basically insurance companies, isn't it?
Yeah, except for people who are on Medicaid or Medicare or medical assistance of some sort. So I basically was on just like insurance for my job. And I had to use the care credit, which is like a crediting company. Um, but it has a really high interest rate. So I was paying that off for some time. I prematurely cashed out my because they give you this offer where you can pay it interest free for a certain number of months. But then when the interest free period ends, all the interest you would have paid is tacked on if you don't pay it off. So I had to like prematurely break my 401k at my job, um,
Say that
and
again.
pay that
Sorry,
off. I
prematurely.
had to prematurely break my retirement at my job, which wasn't a whole lot, but it was enough to pay that off because I would have had an emergency situation. It would have added like thousands and thousands on. Um, and recovery was also difficult.
And
Oh,
recovery was
sorry.
difficult. No, no, no. I mean, it's just that all of these things are good for us to understand that there is, there's like a huge emotional aspect of what you were doing and going through, and the mental state that you were in as well, and the emotional state that you were in. But then there's also this financial aspect as well, which adds to it, doesn't it? You've got all of these
Hmm.
loopholes to jump through and red tape to get around, and you're navigating that the best way you can. But then there's this financial aspect as well. It's just good to understand the difficulty of it all. Yeah, sorry, you were going to say the recovery.
The recovery was also difficult. Like, it's different for everybody. I've heard a lot of people say things like, "Oh, I had pain medication and it barely hurt." And like, I've heard people say, "I have regrets about this solely because how much it hurt." Um, and it, for me, it absolutely hurt quite a bit. I was in a pain for a very long period of time. And so it's also important to talk about in our community that like when you see those videos of like someone having the material, whatever material they're wrapped in after their surgery opened up to see their chest reveal and they're immediately like overjoyed and like overcome with happiness and like it is a moment of like elation for them when they get their surgery done. Not all of us experience that right away. For me, just the sheer level of pain and how difficult the recovery was kind of totally took that over. I would still do it all over again and have it done because it's made me feel a lot better about myself and about being in my body. But at the time, for several months after, I was just mostly in pain.
Yeah, which I can understand is just all encompassing and takes over any kind of elation that you're going to feel for having that surgery because you're just dealing on a day-to-day basis with being in a lot of pain. So that must have been quite a tough experience. When did the pain start to stop then? And when did you start to feel that elation that you mentioned, that kind of joy?
I think that like instead of feeling like a surge of elation like all at once, like as the pain started slowly going away over like a period of several months, like I started feeling more and more happy with things.
Did you look in the mirror then at that point when the pain was going and were really happy with what you saw and started to feel more yourself, I guess?
Yeah, and like that daily level of like happiness that increased was really, really, I think for me, impactful and like lasting. Um, and it's totally fine when, you know, somebody has like that immediate moment of like that joy and elation. I just think that like, you know, we all need to be able to speak up about our experiences and what has happened because some people will experience that pain and have mentioned feeling ashamed because they were like, and I did too. Like, oh, well, I should be immediately overjoyed. And I was just like, no, I can't open the bottle of Tylenol because if I turn the cap, it hurts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you obviously have a preconceived idea of how you should feel at that point, and then you don't feel that because of the pain, and then you start to feel guilt and shame around why am I not feeling this? I totally get that. It's complex. It's a complex thing. The changes in yourself, you already mentioned, you started to get more of a personality. You started to feel more yourself. Did the people around you also start to see these positive changes and see you sort of, becoming the real you?
I heard feedback from my wife like very early on, saying that it seemed like I carried myself with more confidence and like with more happiness. And even my mom remarked, like, you know, what you went through is really hard, but I see that you went through it to like be who you are. And so like for her, that was like if you like go through these difficult things, that means that like you had really had no other choice.
Absolutely. And nothing worth doing or having in life is ever easy. And certainly a transition like you've gone through wasn't easy. And it's really nice that your mum can see those challenges and see that you persisted because you wanted to live your truth. And that's really lovely, especially from parents and who we always want out the validation from. So yeah, and that's great that your wife saw that you were sort of holding yourself with more confidence as well. And that's fantastic. Um, so I think I understand a lot now about the transition that you went through. And this was, I mean, how long ago was this now? This started around 9 years ago, was it?
Yeah, around 2016-ish. Sometimes like the years and my ages for me get kind of mixed up because I was born later in the year. I was born in August. Um, But yeah, I was 23 going on 24. It was 2016 and I started, I remember because it was, that election year. Um,
Yeah, that's a good milestone. And you said that your birthday's in August, where we're talking now towards the end of July. So you've got a birthday coming up soon,
mhm,
which is good. So,
yeah.
uh, and as that birthday is coming up and looking kind of, looking back at the 9 years and what you've been through and how you are in the world now. And you mentioned all of this fantastic stuff that you're doing. And I want to talk about that for a second. But how are you in the world now? How do you feel now, Kane? How do you sort of see the world? How does the world see you, on a day to day? It's a big question, but if you can try to, I guess, give me an idea of.
Sorry, I don't know. My earbud keeps trying to slip out, trying to make a run for it. Um, I think that, well, I'm gonna be 33 in August for just to like throw out there what my age is now. So a few years back in my late 20s, when I was leaving human services, I decided to go back to school. I started at community college, and at this point, I was definitely passing completely as a male. Um, and it was at this point that I realized that even though there's a lot of guides out there for like what to do and what to expect when you're going through medical transition, um, there's not a lot for what to expect, like when you're consistently read as the gender that you've transitioned into. And there's a lot of things about like cis men that make it a very exclusive space at times. Um, and just like not being prepared to like be called sir and like turning around and like, who are you talking to? Oh, you're talking to me. Oh, okay. Um, I think the most jarring instance was early on in community college. I was sitting there and a professor said, yeah, the funny thing about this class, I used to teach it 40 years ago. Back then, it was literally all white men sitting in the room. And now there's only one white man. And like everyone was laughing and I was laughing until I looked around and I'm like, where is he? I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Um, and so like tying that in to my experiences before, like as I went through community college and then I graduated and then I went to 4-year college, all in person. I meant for community to be in person. It was just the pandemic happened. And then a lot of it was remote. Um, but then going to college full time in person for a 4-year degree, it was very difficult because I was there were parts that were very difficult with navigating like that space and being like, oh, I'm around a lot of young people now, and I'm in fields that are like full of like a lot of young women, but like I'm a 30-year-old guy. Like I don't want to look or seem or sound like a creep at all. So like my mind was always consumed by that for a while. Um, and I mean, because my transition's been, for several years now after I started to pass more. For a while, I kind of tucked myself away. I was like, I'm not going to tell people I'm trans because it's safer for several years. Um, and college was also going to 4-year college was also like the thing that made me realize that like, no, I'm not going to like conceal who I am. I'm gonna like come out about that. I'm gonna tell them like who I am on day one. Um, even if I have to deal with discomfort and like even if I have to deal with this or that, everybody's been really well receptive. This is just one of the things that I'm still trying to learn, which I think, you know, is a pretty good journey to go through is like interacting with the world and
I mean,
people around
it's
me.
yeah, and this is, I think, probably a normal timeline. And I think potentially going to college, re-educating yourself, empowered you, re-educating yourself and almost reintroducing yourself to the world, and not telling people that you're trans from day one is absolutely fine. You need to feel safe.
Yeah,
But then you started to step into your power, you started to feel more pride, and then you said, no, I'm going to tell them from day one. There's a clear change in your confidence because and the way that you feel about yourself, because if you are going to commit to telling people on day one, then you know that you could receive some negativity. And at some point you're strong enough and powerful enough and confident enough to go, that's fine. I don't pay you any mind. You don't bother me. Your views on me don't bother me. I'm just being true to myself and true to the world of who I am. That's a beautiful place to be, Kane.
Yeah, and I was able to take like a lot of um, the writing background that I had as well. Because, well, my 2 year degree is in communications, more specifically like journalism. But my 4 year degree, by the time I graduate, it should be this December, will be in English.
Wonderful. The writing has stayed with you through your whole life. You are a writer. You've written as well as the journalism that you were studying and the content creation and all of that kind of stuff. The music, the stories. You've now written two books and you've also written an anthology. So tell me about those books and that anthology.
So, yeah, I did two different novels. The one, it actually took like 11 years before I was able to put it out because when people publish things, you want to make sure that you ideally want to make sure it's up to a good standard. So, like, I was in my early 20s. It was very hard because of money wise. I had to like pay in increments, like per chapter, to like have an editor help me, and then proofreading. Then I had to save money for the cover. Um, I learned a lot throughout that process. So then the second book I was able to put out in only 2 years. So that was nice.
Yeah. So the first
Um,
one was an education. What was the first one called?
oh, it's called Romeo's Card. It's a sapphic, like paranormal romance between two women.
Cool.
And
Between two
the
women. Okay.
second, yeah, the second one is called My Broken Heart is Dead. Um, Basically, a woman in her 70s passes away suddenly. It's a paranormal. She comes back in like someone else's body. So it's like a lot of identity discovery and also like there's queer characters and queer themes. That's pretty much I always end up putting queer characters or some type of theme in what I'm writing. And the anthology uh that I was a part of, so I saw like an open call for like, and now this was nonfiction too. Usually I'm more like on the side of fiction, looking for LGBTQ writers to write stories from our experience based into the theme of defiance. So it's called Defiant Moments, which they started it before the 2024 election, and it became a lot more important after that happened. So I was like, hey, I'm an LGBTQ writer. Like, I would like to, tell a story of defiance that I have. Um, and like, we worked together to like develop that story. Um, and then myself and the other authors were published in that anthology. It's edited by Paul Arabino. Um, but they're based out in like Portland, and like that's the entire way across the country. So I actually ended up going out there uh, in May of this year for the opening launch of the book tour, and like getting to be around all these other authors of like like diverse queer experiences and like very diverse age groups as well um was like the experience of a lifetime to like share
Love
that with
that.
them.
Absolutely. Yeah. You must have come back buzzing, feeling so inspired and empowered and to be part of that. Amazing.
Yeah, no, it was incredible. Especially getting to connect with like trans elders is always, yeah, it always is like a beautiful experience.
And your story in that anthology, was that about your transition and experience?
Not um not necessarily about the transition itself, but honing in on some of those later years, like after that period of time where I decided, like, oh, I'm gonna hide myself because, like, I already passed. And, like, I'm not gonna, oh, I had a coworker who reacted with disgust, so I won't tell people at new jobs. I had this, or that happen. Like, I'm not gonna talk about it.
So the things that we spoke about today, some of those experiences, they're kind of on paper in this anthology then, and which is great, because if anyone's interested in really hearing the detail of those stories, they can go and find that anthology, and I'll put some links in the show notes so people can either get your books or get your anthology, which is fantastic. How does it feel when you're writing, when you're that outlet of putting those experiences down on paper, getting it out through you?
Yeah, no, I thought that it was fantastic and it was very helpful because it I wasn't talking about in this particular story, it's not about like my childhood or like my earlier transition or anything. It's mostly centering around that sole theme of like defiance of like, oh, I'm gonna come out in college on day one. So like that was my moment. So that's pretty much what it's about.
Great, great. um I love that you've been so open with me today about your transition, and for us to understand all of the difficulties around that, the fact that you did have support. That I want to also say that as a community, there are always people out there willing to help, and it's great. The internet is great for connecting you with those people. It's this is the beauty of the internet, really, is connection, and of course there's risk, and you have to safeguard, but finding the right people to support you. You seem to have found that support group through the internet, through social networks and stuff. Do you still speak to those people now? Have you formed friendships? And
Yeah, like I'm still connected with them. They actually are currently like looking for stories for their next anthology. So, um, in contact with them and, just trying to keep in touch with everyone. I think that they're all absolutely fantastic people.
yeah, it's great that you found that as well. It's, again, you found your people, and you found your tribe, and they're all help well, you're all helping each other out, really. As you talk to me today, as you stand today, Kane, and we look back, and you've spoken about Kate, and we've looked back, to some of your childhood. You mentioned about the personality thing, or maybe being bland, or sort of covering up yourself, and how you sort of flourished and came out of yourself. But the writing's always been there. So I'm just wondering how you sort of correlate Kate and Kane. Have you brought parts of Kate with you daily today? Do you still sort of feel the same person? Do you feel a different person? Have you left her behind completely? Like, how do you sort of correlate the two? How do you reconcile Kate and Kane?
I think that, um, like reconnecting with my younger self is a process that is definitely an ongoing journey. Um, and I've brought that definitely with a lot of my writing. Um, I've like utilized different characters, according to like, you know, I have a lot of lesbian characters, um, like that kind of channel like parts of myself from earlier on. Um, I like a lot of the general femininity that I liked when I was younger, except, with the exception of my body because I wanted and I needed to change that. Uh, like bringing back a lot of my old interests and things to that, and like just trying to connect with that inner child. Like, hey, you're going to be really, really, really happy one day. You might not know why yet.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that. We all need to do that to our younger selves, for sure. And I think as a trans person, maybe even more so. So I like that you're doing that. Um, you know, our identities are always changing. We as people are always changing and evolving. And so used to be's do count is about sort of reflecting on a past state, a past identity, and seeing where you are now. And I think you've done that really beautifully and honestly today. And I think it's very important because other people out there might be inspired by your story, by your strength, by your courage. But also, we live in a world where trans people are still politically, socially being attacked. Trans rights is a constant battle. We haven't spoken a lot about the political sort of things that are going on because we want to celebrate you. It's your story. We don't need to, but we should mention that in and amongst all of this struggle that you've gone through, the hoops that you needed to jump through, maybe the emotional struggle, the difficulty with family members, the red tape that you had to get around, then the surgery and the pain and all of that sort of stuff. You're also navigating that in a world where politically we're always fighting for trans rights. We're always fighting for LGBTQ rights, and to be here and to allow people to understand that you're real people and we deserve human rights like everybody else. And talking today, I think, just reminds people that you are real. You're a beautiful person, a great writer, and you're here bravely telling your story. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Like, I definitely, that is what I want to put forth to people. Like, yeah, we're not just like a policy issue. We're not a policy issue. We're people. For your neighbors, for the person behind you in the grocery store, you know, just
Exactly,
your everyday kind
exactly.
of person.
And there's nothing to fear. Everyday kind of person who is doing everyday kind of things and living their best life. And yeah, a lot of it comes from fear, doesn't it? There's no, it's not, or a lack of understanding, ignorance.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you haven't said, any stone that you left unturned, or anything that you want to leave the listeners with? You don't have to. I'm putting you on the spot here, but anything that you want to leave the listeners before we say goodbye?
I would definitely say, especially if you're also in the queer community in any capacity, uh, your story definitely matters. Please make sure that you have it down in some way because it matters and it also can help touch other people and it can be an example for like the next generation of queer people, especially right now in this political landscape, even though I understand being stealth, and wanting to stay safe. Be yourself as openly and loudly as you feel comfortable doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, absolutely. I hope that helps some people. Do it safely, as safe and as confident as you feel. But again, it comes from within, doesn't it? It's that pride that we should feel, that unapologetic pride that we should feel that we are in this world and we should feel that within. And then we should tell our stories, and let people know that we're here in a safe way, because there are, and to the right people, um, because there are still some bad people out there who still want to hurt us, and want to see us gone, and erased almost. So yeah. Where can people find you? Have you got a social media account if anyone wants to follow you and continue sort of like seeing all of the wonderful things that you're doing?
So I have Instagram. Uh, yep, that's usually my preferred platform. I feel like I got some real good real estate here with this username. It's called World's Worst Author.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah,
when did you find out that that was up for grabs?
I was like, no way is this available. Like, oh, it is, because I like to channel like a lot of satire and a lot of humor in amongst serious themes because it helps bring a little levity to more serious messages, I think.
I totally agree. I deal with everything difficult with humor as well. I think that's a normal, natural response. That's great. So, world's worst author. I'll put the link as well in the show notes. But if anyone wants to follow you on Instagram, and you are looking to graduate this December, and I also just want to say that again, education, re-education. We're always learning. We're always growing. But actually, going back to college after being homeschooled and then going back to college as Kane, it's a hugely brave thing, but I'm sure so empowering to know that you're educating yourself and bettering yourself, and you've now got new things to look forward to in the future. Does it feel like that for you?
It absolutely does. Actually, I found out recently I got accepted into an MFA program. So I will start that next summer. So yeah, I feel like even though a lot of things are scary in the world right now, I still feel hopeful for a good future, not just for myself, but like collectively for all of us.
Yeah, great. I love that. I'm hopeful for the future as well for you, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you do, and also for us as a collective community. So definitely, I'm with you there. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kane, for being so honest and open and telling your story. I know that it's going to help a lot of people, and I do really appreciate you.
Thank you very much. It was very good to be here.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Oh, Kane, thank you so much for being so open and honest. You know, we do live in a world now where LGBTQ plus rights are getting better and easier. However, trans people still seem to be demonized, othered, feared in some way, and made to feel like their lives don't matter. So having honest conversations that are really open about someone's experience and making sure that people are hearing that these are just normal, everyday people that were born into the wrong body, I think is hopefully going to help educate people out there and also to inspire and to empower other people to tell their stories. The more we all speak up and tell our stories, the more representation there is, hopefully the more we make this world a better and safer place for everyone to live in. We need now more than ever to love each other, to communalise, and to not other people and make them feel less than, but to support them, to lift them up, and to include them in our communities. As I mentioned before, there are some helpful links in the show notes. If you or anyone that you know is going through anything that Kane has been talking about and needs any help and support, there are wonderful organisations out there who can help. And lastly, if you're still here right to the end, I'm going to ask one thing of you and one thing only. Please take some time to share, like, comment, give a star rating, however you engage with this podcast. It really does help me grow. It really does help me continue to make these episodes. So please spread the word, spread the love. And if you loved this episode, give it a star rating. Also, don't forget to engage with me in all of my social media platforms. It's at U2BDC. I look forward to seeing you very soon on another episode. Until then, stay safe, stay fabulous, and I'll see you very soon.